Hello, fellow cyborgs. I have been putting off doing a check-in on Hindsight is 2020. I've meant to do it in June, and then time has no meaning anymore. So I decided to just kind of do a more casual version instead of my normal setup. And I wanted to just talk to you about how I feel like Hindsight is 2020 is going. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's my rereading project for this year. I wanted to reread 50 books in 2020, and I had themed collections of different sorts of books that I wanted to read, like hesitant favorites, books that I gave 5 stars, poetry collections, stuff like that. So I've got my handy dandy bullet journal where I'm keeping track of my reading this year, and I'm gonna just look at my Hindsight is 2020 spread here. It's not terribly pretty, but this is what it looks like. So from what my tracking says, good news, Hindsight is 2020 has been very successful this year. I have read 46 out of the 50 books that I wanted to reread this year, so I'm way ahead of schedule, which is great. One thing that I'm kind of noticing though is I think that I have more impromptu rereads than I had planned. I had a specific 50 books that I wanted to reread, give or take. A lot of them you'll see in my Hindsight is 2020 TBR videos, and I haven't been doing as good of a job as sticking to that as I intended. There have been probably around 10 books that I have reread this year that I wasn't planning on rereading, and a number of books that I was planning on rereading this year, specifically because I've been planning on rereading them for like 10 years now, that I still haven't gotten to. So the Hindsight is 2020 project was really an impetus for me to really get to those rereads that I've been meaning to reread for years and years, and that really hasn't happened. I also want to reread books so that I can better understand them, get more out of them the second time that I reread them. And I found that a lot of my rereading this year, whenever possible almost, has been done with audiobooks. And as you know, if you've been watching my channel for a while, I just can't focus on audiobooks, like on analyzing audiobooks, nearly as much as I can physical books, because I go through them more quickly. I don't dwell on the language or any specific passage. I don't get the details as much as if I physically read them. So I guess I've been kind of cheating on the Hindsight is 2020 project, because my rereading has not been overall as analytical and close reading as my intent of rereading was. A trend that I've noticed in my rereading star ratings is overall, for the most part, they have gone down. 21 of the things so far have been demoted at least 1 star rating. I'm not super surprised by this. I've become a more analytical and critical reader since first starting my booktube channel and really chronicling my reading. And part of my motivation for doing this project was because there were books that were highly rated on my shelves that I didn't think was a true reflection of how I would feel about them today. So some of these I'm not surprised by, but then others I am, and it was a disappointment. I'm not super bummed out about this though. I truly believe that books are books, and I really don't owe them much allegiance at all. And even if they were a beloved, adored favorite of my teenage years or even my adult years, if it's not doing it for me now, then that's not that big of a deal. I'm not broken up about the idea of a favorite book no longer being a favorite, past the slight embarrassment I would feel announcing it on my channel, but just interpersonally, that really doesn't bother me. We all change and we develop, and there will always be new books to love. I think the number that I'm most excited about is 6 books that I've read this year. I have increased their star rating. Upon rereading, I did get more out of them. And I think these are probably the most successful experiences of Hindsight 2020 so far, and this is really what I'm looking for. These rereading experiences are the most enriching ones, whereas those where I end up demoting the book are perhaps the more revealing ones. I don't necessarily think that these books that I have increased the rating of, I will continue to increase the rating of until they're 5-star favorites. I think that these books might end up being, they fluctuate throughout the years between like a 3 and a 4, or a 4 and a 5, 5 and a 4, and that's okay. I think it's an easy concept to think that a book will be a blank star book to you forever and always. I've not found that to be true, though I find the pressure of that has sometimes changed how I would rate something on Goodreads if I didn't have such a public reading life. A lot of my emotions and how I'm processing a book and how the book is making me feel while I'm reading it will matter a lot in my star rating. I can never love a book that makes me feel uncomfortable or with a sense of dread, because I don't find that feeling to be pleasant, and I can't love something that makes me feel unpleasant. So that right there will like always limit what my 5 stars are going to be. And that too can limit when I reread a book if I'm going to enjoy it the same way. And this goes beyond just like my reading tastes have changed. This is where it's a book that I always want to reread. I enjoy it. It kind of reminds me of when I reread Emma, which must have been at the end of last year because it's not on this list, but I thought I did it fairly recently. The first time I read Emma, I was so pleasantly surprised. I had heard that she is the most unlikable protagonist, and this is very much not anybody's favorite. And I think going in with that expectation, finding delight in so many of the side characters and the psychological complexity and the misunderstandings in Emma, I was really, really pleased with it, and I thought that it was my favorite Austen of all time. However, when I reread it, a bit of that surprising glow had gone, and I found myself thinking that scenes went on for a little bit too long. The side characters weren't quite as enjoyable because I knew they were going to be delightful. So I left that rereading experience, and I'm not sure if I changed the star rating, just kind of wondering, like, is this my favorite Austen? Or did I just have a really good impression of Emma? There have been 2, I think, Hindsight TBR videos that have been mostly neglected by me up until this point. I have not read very much from my 8 young adult middle grade book picks. Those I'm really eager to see how I feel about them now that I'm a more critical reader and I'm an adult and I'm looking for things in middle grade and young adult literature that I may or may not agree with. I haven't been working on that very much. I think in my mind somehow the adult literature I have always gets put first, mostly because those are the things I'm buddy reading, those are the things that I managed to pick for readathons, so I haven't been prioritizing those middle grade and young adult novels, and I feel that neglect, and I do want to remedy it, but every month I feel like I don't quote-unquote find the time. The other collection is my Deathling reads, and I think part of that has been that some of them are nonfiction, and I'm maybe thinking that I'll wait for Nonfiction November, and part of it is they're books that I'm not really going to buddy read, and I definitely prioritize my buddy reads over books that I'm just reading myself for myself. I think a part of me too is thinking that I can save them for autumn because they're, you know, most of them are like ghosty sort of picks, and those would be better in like September, October, November. But I also just don't really want to limit my reading strictly to the seasons, because in October it's always going to be Victober for me, so any spooky read that I'm planning on doing is not going to get priority, and I just need to face that fact, and that's fine. Victober's one of my favorite events of the year. And in California, September never feels like autumn. It's hotter than June and July in California in September. So thinking that somehow September is going to feel more autumnal than August is folly. And then November is Nonfiction November, so not that I've been really strict about that the last few years, but in my head it's like, you read nonfiction in November. So I really have no excuse, and I should be picking those up for sure. I think another part of it too that's definitely a factor is most of the books that I want to reread are by white authors, because most of the books that I've ever read in my life are by white authors. And since I have lately been focusing on reading more Black authors and overall diversifying my reading is not diverse at all, pretty much, apart from rereading the books by Black authors I have on my shelves. And that is one thing that I have been doing lately that I didn't intend to at the beginning of the year, and I kind of feel a little bit like scum for not intending to do that, but I'm glad that I am at least actually doing it rather than just talking about it. And I do have a couple more books by Black authors on my shelves that I want to reread this year. I think at least one. I definitely want to reread either this month or next month, Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, because I'm part of the Octavia E. Butler slow read that Onyx Pages, Sista Sci-Fi, and Musical Tati are hosting. So I want to be prepared for that live show discussion. I think it's a live show discussion. And also, I'm a big fan of Butler. So when I heard about this long-term project, it thrilled me. So I'm kind of looking forward to rereading Kindred, because the first time that I read it, I was filled with absolute dread. I was expecting a horrible rape scene at the beginning of every next chapter. I didn't know what to expect, and it wasn't as awful as my nightmares imagined it to be. So I'm hoping that knowing the character Dana, I think, is going to be okay will make it a even more enjoyable reading experience than it was at the first time. And I think the first time I gave it 4 stars. I don't remember why, because I think it was definitely more of a 3-star enjoyment. So we'll see how I feel about Kindred when I reread it sometime soon. So I think those are the main books that I still need to reread. There's also a number of classics that I want to reread, including 2 really long Dickens, Dombey and Son and Bleak House, and I just don't know when that's going to happen. I did get all, I think, of Dickens' works on my Kindle, which will make rereading those 800-page volumes a lot more physically easy. But Dickens can be a bit of a slog for me. I've been most successful in reading him through audiobook, but then I'm not with the characters slowly analyzing things, so I want to read the text of those works. But they're going to take a lot of time and energy, and I don't have plans to buddy read them with anybody. So I'm kind of thinking that my time rereading this year at least might be better spent with not those huge classics written by a white man in the Victorian era. I'm still hoping to reread Shirley this year. It's possible that that will be the group pick for Victober for this year. If that's the case, I will definitely reread it during Victober, and I'm really eager to see if that truly is my favorite Bronte, specifically Charlotte Bronte. And then, like I talked about, I have those middle grade books and also my Deathling reads, and then at least Kindred by Octavia Butler. Lately, I have been acquiring a lot of books with the direct purpose of reading more Black authors. That has been really rewarding and really fun, but because my physical TBR has been the largest it's been this year, pretty consistently large for the last couple months, I've been feeling the pressure to get my physical TBR down more than to reread. So my focus definitely has not been on my rereading so much in the last couple months. I think it would be a lot of fun to do a self-imposed readathon of the middle grade books or some of the shorter books that I have to reread in September and vlog that experience. I think that might be really rewarding and fun for you guys to watch. If you'd like to see that, let me know in the comments down below, but I am the queen of this channel, so I might just do it anyway, no matter what you guys say. So wrap up of this rambly casual video, it has been easy to reread books this year. I have been relying on audiobooks more than I want to because I want to do more close readings of the books that I reread, and I cannot close read through audio. The size of my physical TBR directly influences how willing and excited I am to reread. The larger the physical TBR, the more guilt I feel over it, and therefore the less excitement to reread books and not decrease the physical TBR. So that's another interesting thing for me to keep in mind with my lifestyle of keeping a low physical TBR, at least low in reference to booktube trends. Having that low TBR will encourage me to reread books more. And I do want rereading to be a natural thing that I do each year. I want at least a quarter of my reading to be rereading each year. So I have to make sure that I don't haul too much so that that rereading can happen guilt-free. And when I reread, I want to in the future make sure that I'm doing that through print books rather than audiobooks, especially if it's a book that I want to look at closely rather than an old favorite that I want to experience in a new medium through audio or just experience again in a more casual manner. A lot of my rereads have been demoted in their star rating, but that's okay because I'm able to clear books off of my shelves that no longer deserve to be there, and that's always a good minimalist cleansing sort of idea. The few rereads I have done where I have increased the star rating, most of those books have been 3-star reads that have been increased to 4, but there have been a couple 2 up to 3, and those have been the most rewarding rereading experiences this year. So keeping books on my shelves that aren't all 5 stars the first time I read them can be rewarding for in the future rereading. And also just being at peace with old favorites no longer being favorites, and that being okay because there will always be new favorites. So I think that's all that I wanted to blather on about today. Please let me know in the comments down below what you think about that self-imposed middle grade readathon reading vlog idea that I had. Also let me know how your rereading has been going, if you've noticed any star rating trends, or have you been relying on audiobooks, or have you only been rereading in print? What's the main thing that stops you from rereading? Is it your physical TBR, which is definitely a part of it for me? Thank you so much for watching. We'll see how these last 4-ish months of the year go with my rereading, and until next time, reread some books and continue to be lovely.